Volunteer Coordinator, Module 4, Orientation, Placement, and Follow-Up. The purpose of this module is to discuss the importance of orientation, where and when orientation should occur, important documents that all volunteers must be introduced to, volunteer placement, and the follow-up timeline. Orientation. It is very important that volunteers with Special Olympics are properly trained and suited for their roles within the organization. All SOO volunteers should complete the SOC Volunteer Orientation course. Position-specific courses are available for a growing number of SOO volunteer positions. Orientation checklist. It is important that each new volunteer to the organization receives a full and comprehensive orientation. The volunteer coordinator should ensure that the following orientation items are covered: Introduction to volunteering with your local community, volunteer resources, volunteer opportunities, and position orientation. Introduction to the local community. Each of our local SOO communities are unique, and it's important for each volunteer to understand how their community works and what programs and events are offered. The following is a list of items you may want to cover with them: Structure of the local community council, mention important events in your community such as fundraisers, local tournaments, and volunteer appreciation events, facts and operating guidelines, and finally, program information. Volunteer resources. Special Olympics works hard to ensure our volunteers have access to the resources they need to excel in their volunteer experience with the organization. It is important for the volunteer coordinator to ensure that each volunteer is aware of the resources available to them. This includes NCCP training, both SOC and sport-specific, the information portal, including coaching guides and forums, e-courses, mentors in your community or district, SSCT and DAT, and Special Olympics staff. Volunteer opportunities. There are many opportunities within the organization for volunteers to expand their skill set and develop new skills. It is important to inform volunteers about the opportunities available, including assistant coach, head coach, and sports clubs manager, community subcommittees, community council positions, DAT and SSCT positions, major games opportunities, provincial and national panels and committees. Position orientation. This is the most important aspect of a new volunteer's orientation process. Volunteers should be oriented regarding who they report to, what their duties are, emergency action plans, and facilities, participants, and equipment. As a volunteer coordinator, it is your responsibility that this orientation takes place. Follow-up. Volunteers tend to stick with an organization longer if they feel that they are being useful and their contributions are helping individuals or the organization as a whole. Following up with both your new volunteers and the individuals they report to helps to ensure that volunteers have a meaningful volunteer experience and that they are the right fit for a program. It is recommended that you follow up with your new volunteers and their supervisors 3 weeks after placement, 8 weeks after placement, and at the end of the season. The 3rd and 8-week follow-up. Your follow-up with the volunteer can be fairly informal. You can either stop by practice, phone them, or touch base through email. Possible questions for the new volunteer include: Was the position orientation conducted? How have things been going? Is there anything you can help them with? And be sure to remind them of any upcoming events. Possible questions for the supervising volunteer include, how has the new volunteer been working out? And are there any supports or training they may need? This is a good time to check in regarding the status of volunteers in the program and any training needs. It's a good idea to check in with all of your volunteers at the end of each season so you'll have an idea regarding how many volunteers you will need to recruit. These follow-ups can be fairly informal and can take place in person at practice, over the phone, or through email correspondence. Large communities may find follow-up difficult, so it may be necessary to use email, online surveys, or work with head coaches to ensure follow-up. Questions for the volunteers. How did the season go for you? Will you be returning to volunteer with this program next year? Are there any other programs or volunteer opportunities you are interested in? Is there any training you would like? And be sure to remind them of any upcoming events. Questions for the supervising volunteer. How did all of your volunteers do during the season? Is there anything you will need for next season? And did you experience any issues with the volunteers? Remember to ask the supervising volunteer the volunteer questions as well. Volunteer placement tips. When filling positions, don't fill them with warm bodies. Look for someone with the skill set you are looking for. Provide prospective volunteers with a chance to observe a program and talk to a current volunteer. Try to place volunteers as quickly as possible, but be upfront regarding the waiting time to conduct a PRC. If it is off-season, find some way to keep the volunteer engaged. This can include fundraisers, competitions, and alternative programs. Find out what the prospective volunteer hopes to gain from their volunteer experience and try to help ensure their placement will fulfill their goals. Match a volunteer with a position that they ask to be placed in. If this isn't possible, try to find something that is a close fit or refer back to their goals. If you find yourself with a surplus of volunteers, instead of turning them away, think of ways you can utilize them. This includes occasional positions, subcommittees, or check with the supervising volunteer. Often extra volunteers are welcomed into programs.